When I was a wee little lad, maybe first or second grade, I used to make these deals with my dad on my spelling test. If I spelled all my words correct and the bonus words, then that Friday he would take me to go get any video game that I wanted. Now at the time I had Madden 03, I skipped out on Madden 4, so the next game up to get was Madden 5. Until I ended up seeing this commercial and it seemed like it popped up right on cue.
The clock will continue to run. Fourth down, seconds remaining. They're going to need to call a TO.
Yo, this is T.O.
Game Informer calls it the one football game you must have.
Yeah.
And IGN says it will own your soul. Get ESPN NFL 2K5 from ESPN Video Games.
Hey, how'd you get this number?
Rated E for everyone.
In that immediate second, I already knew what my next game was. Because keep in mind, PS2 games were going for $50 at the time, so $19.99 was a steal. Plus T.O. was on the cover and I was an Eagles fan to the core. I still am, but I digress. So Friday rolls around and like clockwork, I aced my spelling test and I show my dad without missing a stride. He grabbed his keys and took me straight over to GameStop. I kind of remember like it was yesterday. It was wet outside, mostly cloudy. It was about to start raining again. But anyway, as we pull up to the GameStop, we hop out and head for the door. Before the guy at the counter could even finish his "Welcome to GameStop" line, I had already made a beeline to the game I wanted. My pops was like, "This the game you want?" By my big Kool-Aid smiling bright eyes, he already knew. And when I told him it was only $20, he looked at me and said, "Damn, really? Not bad." Considering how much PS2 games were back in the day, it literally wasn't a bad price for once. Ring it up, hand the guy 20, and he bags it up for me. I get home and I start to peel back the cellophane wrapper and I get embellished with joy. This warm feeling that I was going to play a football game, just a game in general, a brand new one that was going to change my perspective on football. Call me weird, but I like getting a new game, unwrapping it and smelling the new game smell. Kind of like it comes out of the factory fresh. You know what I'm saying? Almost like Krispy Kreme donuts. I know it's kind of nerdy, but oh well. Ladies and germs, welcome to my world of ESPN NFL 2K5. First thing you see when you open up 2K5 is the classic studio of ESPN at that time. You hear the classic dan-and-net, dan-and-net. Then for me, I jump straight into the menus to look for practice mode, only to find something called basic training. Here, you learn the mechanics and controls of ESPN NFL 2K5. Once you're done with that, you can jump into practice mode to brush up on your newfound skills in special moves, scrimmage, or kickoff. Now that that's out of the way, let's jump into play now. Chris Berman catches you briefly before you load into your game, telling you his thoughts on the matchup beforehand. Now let me run you through this thought process I had as a kid. ESPN was running the sports world back in the day, especially when it came to football. I used to try to stay up past my bedtime to watch Monday Night Football, but whatever I missed, I caught it on SportsCenter the next day. You had my man Stuart Scott bringing in the urban culture and made watching highlights from games refreshing and energizing. I would watch SportsCenter religiously every chance I got. God rest his soul. We all miss him. Shout out to Stuart Scott. Before the game started, you see fans either getting to their seats, tailgating, or getting snacks from the concession stand. Then you saw the camera pans in the different angles while commentators Dan Stevens and Peter O'Keefe give you the rundown on players to look out for. Every bit of that was very reminiscent of what I used to see when I would watch football on ESPN at the time. And that's what drew me in, immersion. I could easily identify with everything I saw in-game with what I saw on TV. To the scoreboard, to the ticker popping up sometimes when I achieved a goal, the different camera cuts, transition wipes, highlighting players' individual stats, and at this point, you get it. One thing about this game that I liked was the cutscenes. They weren't too drawn out or exaggerated. They kept you intrigued and gave you somewhat of an insight as to how a player was feeling, how the sidelines were reacting to plays, the fans' reactions showing the chain gang coming out for the first down measurements, and players getting injured. They didn't feel repetitive and they always kept the games feeling fresh. One thing I will say is this, I only played a majority of this game on PS2, so that was all I remember. But I recently picked up a 360 Slim and grabbed a copy of NFL 2K5, seeing as how I was on a backwards compatibility list. I noticed that there was so much more detail to the player models, showing veins and having actual skin tones. The jerseys having a good amount of detail to them and the ball looking more detailed than the PS2 version. Another thing on the PS2 version, if you had a fat PS2 with a hard drive, the halftime show would show actual highlights instead of the slideshow presentation that you would get if you had a PS2 Slim or without the hard drive. The OG Xbox had a hard drive and the 360 also supported the highlight playback as well, so that was a plus. You had Susie Colbert give you insight in the beginning of the game, either from coaches, covering the injury that occurred a few plays ago, and at the end of the game, she would interview the player of the game. Chris Berman would give you his trademark ad-libs and signature verbiage while showcasing halftime highlights and stats, pretty much as to what you would see on SportsCenter. After you get done with your first game, you make your way to the crib. That's a feature I would never forget for years to come. The crib was a feature that allowed you to show off your accomplishments, deck out your new spot with posters, fish tanks, and have a motorcycle in your house and a bunch more. I remember when I finally got to the point of unlocking the air hockey table, the finger football table, and the trivia machine, and the darts machine. I spent so much time playing them that when I got bored of playing football, I just decided to mess around and, play one of those things. The soundtrack was dope. My favorite go-to song was RJD2, Clean Living. I would just put it on the loop, let it repeat, and just zone out and daydream. I would get this warm feeling that rushed over me as I would think about the game I had, where I was going off, where I felt elite. Basically what you would do at your own crib, just chill and daydream for the time being. Now let's not forget to mention that sometimes a celebrity will call you to play a game against you with a souped up fantasy team that they drafted, whether it was David Arquette, Carmen Electra, Funkmaster Flex, and Steve-O. I'm trying to think, I don't know if there's one more person, but I do remember those people. But as we leave there, let's check out first person football. This mode always stuck with me as a kid, because I never really got the chance to play organized football, but boy did I love football. I always wondered what it would be like to be on the field, inside the helmet of an NFL player. First person football mode was a great game mode. You got to be a defensive lineman, safety, linebacker, cornerback, defensive end, halfback, wide receiver, and a quarterback. I love hearing the trash talk from players when they stepped on the field. It gave the atmosphere of being on the gridiron a more personalized touch. You got to experience what it was like to be tackled or tackle somebody. You could be a safety and read the route combos and play a zone. Be a cornerback and read the moves of a wide receiver. Be a quarterback and read the defense during pre-snap, then drop back and find an open man. Or you could be a running back and figure out which gap you're going to hit on the run play. I spent a lot of time in this mode, but I have to do it in increments or else you're going to get burned out. I dabbled in the ESPN 25th anniversary mode, but now that I'm older, I can appreciate football history. As a kid, I didn't really too much pay attention to this mode, so I kind of glossed over it. It gave you a historical lesson about games like the Immaculate Reception and allowed you to replay the game during that time. But like I said, I didn't spend too much here, but franchise mode is a different story. Franchise mode was chock full of features that gave you complete control of your team. First thing I noticed was the button that said watch this week's SportsCenter. I wasn't too sure what that meant as a kid, so I hit that button. I was on PS2, so that meant select. Next thing I know, I seen the SportsCenter startup screen and then the theme song, and it literally mirrored exactly what I saw when SportsCenter came on around that time. Chris Berman would read off the teams and the scores, and they even showed different highlights from said teams. They also talked about signings and injuries and a lot more when Trey Wingo would come over and take over for that segment. Another feature around that time was weekly preparation. You had a set amount of hours each day all the way up until game day to get your team ready for Sunday. You could spend it having team meetings to boost morale, watch film, have a player get rehabilitated, have scrimmage with full of light pads, have your linemen do drills, DBs learn routes, watch more film, and a whole lot more. Now, honestly, I could never really harness the full power weekly preparation, which resulted in my men going down in ratings and some going up in positive boosts. You had the front office that allowed you to look at your team's finances, cap room, needs, scout college players, etc. Fast forward to the end of the season, you had a fully fleshed out offseason where you can go and re-sign players or talk some out of retirement. Going a little bit further, we head down to draft day. SportsCenter had a special dedicated to the draft day with Trey Wingo and Mel Kiper running that episode. Now it's draft day and they put you in what they call quote unquote the war room, as they call it, and you swipe from screen to screen and then down to your clipboard while you make your decision on who to draft. Now with everything is all said and done, you're ready to start your new season. Now I already know what you're thinking. What about the VIP system? What about creative team? What about creative player? Trust me, I know what you're getting at, but my approach to this retrospective was a little different. You see, I'm looking at it from the perspective from my kid lenses and mindset. As a kid, I wasn't focused on those things until a little later on when I grew up to be a little bit more sophisticated and logical. What I named off were the things I remember spending the most time playing. The one thing I will say I'll mention is the book and the menus, where you would open it and it would tell you the nicknames of moves, certain routes, rules, and anything related to football. Think of it like football for dummies. But back to my previous point. This wasn't a revisit to examine the game as a collective, but rather give you a glimpse as to what it was like playing this game in my childhood. That's why in the beginning I try to paint the scene for you to ride passenger in this metaphorical car I'm driving. I feel as if it's unique in a way given its perspective I'm telling it in. Hopefully y'all enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like if you did. Share with everyone you know. And until next time, I'm Just Divine, and I'm signing out. Peace.